Hi everyone, my name is Mark, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Samantha Vernigallo first met Drew Garnier when they were both young adults, living on Long Island, New York. Although the exact details of how they met remain private to their families, what we do know is that both Samantha and Drew were Long Island natives who found love in each other during their 20s. Samantha, who was originally from Centereach, had graduated from Centereach High School and was known by her friends and family as a warm, caring young woman with dreams of starting a family. Drew, who hailed from Lake Grove, seemed to share those same aspirations for a traditional family life. As time passed, Samantha and Drew's relationship blossomed into something deeper. They discovered they both wanted the same things in life: a loving marriage, children, and the opportunity to build something meaningful together. Samantha couldn't help but be drawn to Drew's apparent stability and his desire to create a family. To those around them, they appeared to be a couple who genuinely cared for each other and were working toward a shared future. What made their relationship particularly appealing to both families was how normal and grounded they seemed. Neither Drew nor Samantha had any significant red flags in their backgrounds. No criminal history, no documented substance abuse, no apparent mental health issues that would suggest future problems. Drew maintained steady employment and seemed committed to providing for his family. Samantha was described by those who knew her as a beautiful, compassionate, and loving woman who always wanted the best for her children. After several years together, Drew and Samantha made the decision to marry and start their family. Their union was blessed with 2 daughters, first Adelina and then Izzy, who was 6 years younger. The couple seemed to embrace parenthood with joy, and Samantha threw herself into being a devoted mother. She was the type of woman who put her children's needs before her own, always ensuring they felt loved and protected. However, as their family grew, Drew and Samantha began to feel the constraints of Long Island life. The cost of living was high, and they dreamed of providing their daughters with a different kind of upbringing, one that was quieter, more affordable, and offered a stronger sense of community. It was this desire that led them to make a significant life change. In search of a better life for their family, Drew and Samantha made the decision to relocate from Long Island to the small, rural town of Masonville in Delaware County, New York. Located in the beautiful Catskills region, approximately 150 miles northwest of New York City, Masonville offered everything they thought they wanted: lower cost of living, a tight-knit community, and the kind of peaceful environment where children could grow up safely. The family settled into a mobile home on Hook Road, a quiet residential area where neighbors knew each other and children could play outside without constant worry. For Drew and Samantha, this move represented hope and new beginnings. Samantha couldn't help but envision her daughters having the kind of childhood she had always dreamed of providing. One filled with fresh air, natural beauty, and the security that comes from living in a place where everyone looks out for each other. Samantha remained steadfast in her belief that family was the most important thing in life. She devoted herself entirely to caring for Adelina, who was 9 years old, and Izzy, who was 6. Friends and family members who knew her described her as the type of mother who would do anything for her children. She was patient, loving, and had an innate ability to make her daughters feel cherished and secure. Drew, meanwhile, seemed to settle into their new life well. He found employment and appeared to be committed to providing for his growing family. To the outside world, Drew and Samantha appeared to be a couple who had successfully navigated the challenges of marriage and parenthood. Their life in Masonville seemed peaceful and stable. What made their situation even more joyful was the news that Samantha was pregnant with their 3rd child. By September 2024, she was 5 months along, and the couple had learned they were expecting another daughter. For Samantha, this news brought immense happiness. She loved being a mother and was thrilled at the prospect of welcoming another little girl into their family. However, it was evident to those close to the family that Drew's reaction to the pregnancy news was markedly different. While Samantha embraced the idea of having a 3rd daughter, Drew had been hoping for something else entirely. According to family members who would later speak in court, Drew had wanted a boy. This desire for a son had apparently been growing stronger with each daughter, and the news that their 3rd child would also be a girl seemed to affect him in ways that no one could have predicted. Despite this underlying tension, there were no obvious warning signs that suggested Drew was capable of violence. He had no prior criminal history, no documented issues with law enforcement, and no apparent history of domestic violence. To their neighbors in Masonville, the Garniers appeared to be a typical family, adjusting to life in a small town. Samantha's unease grew as she noticed subtle changes in Drew's demeanor regarding the pregnancy, but even she could not have imagined what was to come. She remained committed to her family and continued to focus on preparing for the arrival of their third daughter, who was due to be born in February 2025. Samantha was also looking forward to celebrating her 30th birthday, which was just 2 weeks away. The family's daily routine continued normally throughout the late summer and early fall of 2024. Adelina and Izzy attended school, Samantha managed the household while caring for her pregnancy, and Drew went to work each day. To anyone observing from the outside, they seemed like a family that had found their rhythm in their new home. But beneath the surface, something dark was growing. Drew's disappointment about having another daughter appeared to be festering in a way that no one around him could detect. There were no calls to police, no documented incidents of domestic violence, and no interventions from family or friends who might have sensed danger. This absence of warning signs would later make what happened even more shocking to everyone who knew them. What particularly troubled those who would later try to understand Drew's actions was that he seemed to have everything a man could want: a loving wife, 2 healthy daughters, steady employment, and a third child on the way. Samantha had given him a life filled with love and stability, yet something inside him was slowly turning this blessing into a source of rage. On the evening of Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, just 2 days after Labor Day, the Garnier family appeared to be settling in for a typical weeknight. Adelina and Izzy were likely preparing for bed after what had been a normal day at school. Samantha, 5 months pregnant, was probably going through her usual evening routine of caring for her daughters and preparing for the night ahead. No one could have predicted that this seemingly ordinary evening would become the night that would destroy their family forever. Drew's frustration and disappointment about the gender of their unborn child had apparently reached a breaking point, though he had given no clear indication to anyone that he was planning violence. At approximately 11:29 p.m., the quiet town of Masonville was shattered by an emergency that would horrify the entire community. Drew Garnier himself placed a call to 911, reporting what he described as a domestic dispute at his home on Houck Road. The dispatcher who took the call could never have imagined the scene of horror that was waiting for the responding officers. According to the information provided to responding officers, Drew told the 911 dispatcher that he was attempting to apply pressure to his wife's wounds to stop the bleeding. This initial report suggested that Samantha had been injured and that Drew was trying to help her, painting a picture that was very different from the reality of what had actually occurred. New York State Police Troopers Corey King and Ronald King were dispatched to respond to the emergency call. As they drove through the dark, rural roads toward Houck Road, they had no way of knowing that they were heading toward one of the most disturbing crime scenes they would ever encounter. They approached the wide mobile home with a covered porch, medical bags, and weapons ready, prepared to help what they believed was an injured woman. The scene was gruesome beyond anything the experienced officers could have anticipated. As they approached the residence, they observed Drew Garnier stick his head out the front door and then quickly duck back inside. This behavior immediately raised their suspicions that something was not right about the situation. Moments later, the officers heard a single gunshot from inside the home, what they would later describe as a high-velocity shot. Filled with shock and horror at this unexpected development, the troopers immediately retreated to the end of the driveway and called for backup from a Delaware County Sheriff's deputy. Using the sheriff's patrol car as a shield, the officers cautiously approached the house again, not knowing what they might encounter. What happened next would haunt them for the rest of their careers. The 9-year-old daughter, Adelina, suddenly ran from the house toward the police officers, her clothes covered in blood. With a heavy heart, the officers realized that this child had witnessed something no child should ever see. Adelina told the officers through her tears and trauma that her mother had been stabbed and that there was a man inside the house with a gun, the man she identified as her father, Drew Garnier. As the officers worked to secure Adelina and get her to safety, the 6-year-old daughter, Izzy, also ran from the house. Like her older sister, little Izzy's clothes were soaked with blood, and it was evident that both children had suffered stab wounds during whatever horror had unfolded inside their home. Both daughters were conscious and able to communicate with the officers, but they were clearly in shock from what they had experienced. The officers immediately began providing first aid to the children while calling for additional medical support and backup. It was evident to everyone that these little girls had survived something unspeakably traumatic. Once both children were safely away from the property and receiving medical attention, the officers turned their attention back to the house where Drew Garnier remained inside. They called for him to come out, and to their surprise, he emerged with his hands raised in surrender. Drew was immediately arrested without resistance, but the officers noted that he was covered in blood and had cuts on his hands. During the arrest, police discovered a butter knife in his left front pocket, a chilling piece of evidence that would later be crucial to understanding exactly what had happened inside the Garnier home that night. The officers then entered the house to find Samantha Garnier lying on her side, suffering from multiple stab wounds, but still clinging to life. Troopers and Delaware County Sheriff's deputies immediately began rendering first aid while waiting for emergency medical technicians to arrive. Despite their efforts, it was clear that Samantha's injuries were severe and life-threatening. All 3 victims, Samantha and both of her daughters, had sustained multiple stab wounds in what investigators would later determine was a prolonged and brutal attack. The severity of their injuries required immediate medical evacuation. Samantha was airlifted to Wilson Medical Center in Johnson City, while both children were airlifted to Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse. Despite the heroic efforts of medical personnel, Samantha Garnier was pronounced dead at Wilson Medical Center. The 29-year-old mother, who had been just 2 weeks away from celebrating her 30th birthday, had lost her life to the man who had promised to love and protect her. Her unborn daughter, whom she had been carrying for 5 months, also died as a result of the attack. The 2 surviving daughters, Adelina and Izzy, were hospitalized in serious condition, but were expected to make full recoveries from their physical injuries. However, the psychological trauma they had endured would require extensive support and counseling for years to come. Drew Garnier was immediately transported to A.O. Fox Hospital for treatment of what authorities described as superficial wounds he had sustained during the attack. After receiving medical treatment, he was processed at the New York State Police Barracks in Sydney, where he would face the full weight of the law for his horrific actions. The investigation that followed was comprehensive and thorough, led by New York State Police with assistance from multiple agencies, including the Delaware County Sheriff's Office and various local police departments. Major Lucas Schuta, Troop C Commander, held a press conference on September 6, 2024, to provide additional details about the arrest and charges. What made this case particularly shocking to investigators was that this was the first time state police had ever responded to the Garnier residence for any kind of domestic dispute. There had been no prior calls, no documented history of domestic violence, and no indication that Drew was capable of such brutality against his own family. As the investigation continued, police discovered additional disturbing evidence. A search of the property revealed that Drew Garnier possessed multiple firearms, including an AK-47 assault weapon, a tactical ST-15 assault weapon, and 2 large-capacity ammunition feeding devices. This discovery added weapons charges to the growing list of crimes he would face. On September 5, 2024, Drew Garnier was formally charged with second-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted second-degree murder. He was arraigned at Delhi Town Court and remanded to the Delaware County Jail without bail. Delaware County District Attorney Sean Smith moved quickly to convene an emergency grand jury session, reflecting the severity of the charges and the strength of the evidence. On September 11, 2024, the Delaware County Grand Jury returned an 8-count indictment against Drew Garnier, expanding the charges to include weapons violations. The indictment included second-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, criminal use of a firearm, and multiple counts of criminal possession of weapons. Drew Garnier pleaded not guilty to all charges at his arraignment before Delaware County Court Judge John L. Hubbard, who remanded him to the custody of the Delaware County Sheriff's Office without bail. If convicted on all charges, he faced a potential sentence of 25 years to life in prison. However, as the case progressed through the court system, it became clear that proceeding to trial would mean forcing Adelina and Izzy to relive their trauma by testifying about the night their father murdered their mother and attempted to kill them. This consideration would ultimately shape how the case was resolved. On March 25, 2025, Drew Garnier appeared in Delaware County Court and pleaded guilty to reduced charges as part of a negotiated plea agreement. The prosecution agreed to the plea deal primarily to spare his two young daughters from the additional trauma of having to testify at trial. The plea agreement included first-degree manslaughter and 2 counts of first-degree assault, with a total sentence of 30 years in state prison followed by 15 years of post-release supervision. While this was less than the maximum sentence he could have received, District Attorney Sean Smith emphasized that the agreement served the best interests of the child victims. The sentencing hearing took place on May 13, 2025, in Delaware County Court before Judge John L. Hubbard. The courtroom was packed with family members, community members, and court personnel for what would be the final chapter in the legal proceedings. Only one victim impact statement was read at the sentencing, that of Samantha's father, Gregory Vernagallo, who had traveled from Centereach to address the court. His statement provided crucial insight into the motive behind the crime that had mystified investigators and the community. He had wanted a boy, Vernagallo told the court, explaining that Drew Garnier had been angry about learning that Samantha was pregnant with their third daughter. This revelation that gender disappointment had been the catalyst for such horrific violence added another layer of tragedy to an already incomprehensible crime. Vernagallo also addressed the court about his granddaughter's current situation. "I am their father now. I will protect them." He explained that he had adopted both girls and moved from Myrtle Beach to care for them full-time, stating that his life had changed forever and that he hadn't left their sides since the attack. Drew Garnier addressed the court during the sentencing, expressing what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I'm sorry to all my in-laws, especially my children. I would trade my life for my wife's. I hope someday I can make amends with my kids." He continued, "I haven't talked to them in 8 months. I won't force anything on them. I respect their wishes. But if they ever want to see me, I hope I'm allowed to be there for them." Public Defender Joseph Ermetti emphasized the lack of explanation for the crime. "My client has no explanation. I don't believe anybody in this room would disagree that this was extremely tragic. He still refers to his wife as his best friend. We had a psychiatrist evaluate him, but there is no medical justification for what happened." Judge John L. Hubbard acknowledged Drew Garnier's lack of prior criminal history before imposing the sentence. "You took a life and injured your children. They had a right to expect protection from you," the judge told Garnier before finalizing the 30-year sentence. During the sentencing, Drew Garnier made a request to maintain contact with his daughters while serving his sentence. Delaware County District Attorney Sean Smith strongly objected and requested no contact orders for as long as the law allowed. Judge Hubbard granted the prosecution's request, issuing complete stay-away orders for both daughters until the year 2056, 8 years beyond Garnier's maximum possible release date. The judge noted that if the girls ever wished to contact their father in the future, they could petition the court to amend the protective orders. Drew Garnier refused to sign the protective orders, but they were served to him in court regardless. His refusal to sign demonstrated his continued resistance to accepting the full consequences of his actions against his own children. The aftermath of this tragic case continues to reverberate through the lives of everyone it touched. Adelina and Izzy, now orphaned by their father's actions, were placed in the loving care of their maternal grandfather, who legally adopted them and relocated to provide them with stability and support. A GoFundMe campaign organized by Aaron Leahy of Centereach raised over $16,000 to support the 2 surviving children. The campaign described Samantha as a beautiful, compassionate, and loving mother who always wanted the best for her babies, and included a touching tribute noting that she was due to have a baby girl in February of 2025 and would be celebrating her 30th birthday in 2 weeks. The case deeply impacted the small community of Masonville, where such violent crime is extremely rare. District Attorney Sean Smith praised the work of law enforcement, stating, "As a result of their thorough and comprehensive investigation, their work in preparing the case, and their work with the victim's family, these amazing public servants ensured that Mr. Garnier will spend 30 years behind bars." What makes this case particularly haunting is the complete absence of warning signs that might have predicted such violence. Drew Garnier had no criminal history, no documented mental health issues, and no prior contact with law enforcement. The revelation that gender disappointment over an unborn child could drive someone to murder their pregnant wife and attempt to kill their daughters serves as a chilling reminder of how domestic violence can explode without warning.